I don't want money. Please save my mom.
Dad. The word lands like a bullet. Cameras swarm, Dorian Vale freezes, $1 billion promise still burning on live TV. The child's bandaged arm flashes a hospital bracelet. She stares him down. I don't want money, she says. Save my mom. He orders her removed. She lifts her wrist, matching blood tag. Run the DNA test, she whispers. The crowd leans in. He reaches for his phone. What he does next will decide whether she lives or dies. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The test begins. Cameras flash. Security locks down the hospital wing. And for the first time in his life, Dorian Vale feels his control begin to slip. White-coated technicians move with urgent precision. A nurse swabs Maya's arm, her tiny fingers trembling as she looks up. Not at the cameras, not at the reporters pressed against the glass, but at him. At the man she called Dad. Dorian doesn't flinch. He refuses to. Run every verification protocol, he orders. Chain of custody, genetic integrity seals. If this is a media stunt, it ends now. But in the mirrored reflection of the observation window, he sees something he can't rationalize. Fear. Not for his reputation, for the truth. Minutes turn into hours. Then the door opens. The chief geneticist's face is pale. It's a 99.9% match, she says quietly. She is your biological daughter. The room erupts. Reporters scream. Phones light up. Dorian's security team locks arms as a wave of media crashes forward. One journalist shouts, Mr. Vale, does this mean you abandoned a secret child? Another yells, Who is the mother? Is this a scandal? A setup? Dorian doesn't answer. He can't. His pulse is a roar in his ears. For the first time in his billion-dollar life, no press statement, no public relations firm, no strategic maneuver can shield him from the raw truth echoing in that hallway. He has a daughter. Within hours, the decision is made, not by Dorian, but by his parents. She is to be brought to the Vale estate immediately under their guardianship. We will not leave our granddaughter in danger another minute, his mother declares, her voice soft yet absolute. When Maya arrives, she doesn't marvel at the marble floors or gold-trimmed staircases. She pauses at the entrance to the dining hall, eyes darting across the endless buffet of delicacies. She takes a roll of bread. Just one. Then quietly hides it in her pocket. For Mom, she whispers to the maid who tries to offer more. That night, she refuses the queen-sized canopy bed prepared for her. I don't want to dirty it, she says, curling up in a corner. I'm used to small spaces. And something hollow in Dorian's chest shifts. Across the city, in a sleek penthouse overlooking the skyline, Victor Crane watches the news replay with a slow, predatory smile. So, he murmurs, lifting his glass of scotch. The great Dorian Vale has a weakness. He dials a number. Pull the bridge loans, all of them, and notify the suppliers, effective immediately. They are to suspend all contracts with Vale Atlas. A pause. Yes. Even if they take a loss, tell them it's temporary. By the time this is over, Dorian won't be able to pay them anyway. At Vale Atlas headquarters, board members gather in a private virtual session. This child scandal will erode shareholder confidence, the CFO snaps. We need a public distancing statement, immediately. Dorian stands rigid. There will be no statement. She is my daughter. Silence falls. Then the COO says carefully, then she is a liability. Back at the estate, Maya is sketching quietly on a napkin, 3 figures holding hands, when her pencil slips. Her small frame sways. Maya? Dorian's mother rushes forward. Maya collapses. As they lift her, she murmurs through half-conscious lips, "Mom, they're going to hurt her." Dorian's blood runs cold. For the first time in his life, his empire is not what's at stake. His family is. Maya's collapse was the tipping point. While she slept under medical watch, Dorian stood in the shadows of her room, fists clenched. "Mom, they're going to hurt her." The words echoed like a warning bell. There was only one person she could mean: Amara Brooks. By morning, Dorian had already deployed his private investigation team, but he didn't wait for them. He went himself. It took 12 hours of surveillance, bank tracing, and medical inventory cross-checks to find her. Not in a penthouse, not in hiding abroad. She was working in a dimly lit public hospital on the outskirts of the city, drawing blood at night for minimum wage under the name Amanda Blake. Dorian watched through a narrow glass panel as she moved softly between patients. No jewelry, no makeup, just quiet focus. A woman who had traded her life for anonymity. When she stepped into a supply room, he followed. She froze the moment she saw him. Her voice was composed, but her eyes widened with alarm. "How did you find me?" "Maya collapsed," he said. "She called for you." Pain flickered in her expression, but only for a heartbeat. Then her resolve returned, sharp as steel. "I told her not to go to you," she said. "Not because you're her father, but because being near you puts her in danger." Dorian stepped forward, blocking the door. "I know you went underground. What I don't know is why." Amara's jaw tightened. "You want the truth?" She looked him dead in the eye. 3 years ago, I discovered trial data at Crane Meridian. Victor Crane was falsifying safety reports. Hundreds of patients died during drug trials, and he buried every body under forged lab results. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a cracked phone, her only lifeline, loaded with encrypted files. "The night I tried to submit the evidence, someone broke into my apartment. They planted vials, forged logs, and by morning I was indicted for tampering with clinical materials." She took a shaky breath, then steadied. "I didn't run to hide from justice. I ran because Victor Crane ordered my death." Dorian felt an unfamiliar tightening in his chest. It wasn't pity. It was fury. "Come with me," he said. "I'll keep you safe at my estate. Full protection, legal support, whatever it takes." But Amara stepped back. "I don't need your mansion," she said quietly. "I need justice. I will not live in your gilded cage while Victor Crane continues to kill people for profit." Her words hit him harder than any headline ever had. Dorian's phone buzzed. A security alert. Crane Meridian operatives had been spotted near the hospital perimeter. Maya hadn't just come to find him. She had come to save her mother's life. Dorian looked at Amara, realization dawning like a storm breaking. "They weren't coming for Maya," he said slowly. "They were coming for you." Amara nodded once, as if she had already accepted death as a cost of truth. But Dorian hadn't. Not anymore. The war didn't begin with bullets or boardroom votes. It began with silence. A silence so loud it echoed across continents. Banks not returning calls, suppliers unavailable due to contractual uncertainty, and every screen in Vale Atlas headquarters flashing the same red ticker. Vale Atlas liquidity in crisis, $800 frozen overnight, unconfirmed reports, company tied to federal investigation of ex-lab tech. Dorian stared at the screen in disbelief. In 24 hours, Victor Crane had done what no competitor, no regulator, no scandal had ever managed. He made the world question whether Dorian Vale was untouchable. But it wasn't the financial crisis that sent rage pulsing through Dorian's veins. It was the sight beside it, Amara Brooks, named in ongoing felony investigation, suspected in medical evidence tampering. They had twisted her story, painted her as a criminal, erased her sacrifices, and now the world believed it. Dorian? We must protect investor confidence, said Andrew Locke, the COO of Vale Atlas, voice smooth, too calm. This woman, Amara Brooks, is a public liability. We need to issue a formal statement denouncing any association with her. Dorian's eyes narrowed. She saved lives. She exposed Crane's crimes. Locke leaned forward. Allegedly. And allegations don't keep markets alive. You want to save this company? Cut her loose. Remove her legal protection. Let the authorities handle her. The implication was clear. Throw her to the wolves, or lose everything. The rest of the board members shifted uncomfortably. They were afraid, not of losing money, but of losing him. Dorian Vale had always been their shield. Now he was their vulnerability. Dorian stood slowly. Amara Brooks will not be sacrificed to save our stock price. Locke's jaw twitched, just slightly. The mask slipped, and Dorian saw it. Betrayal. By afternoon, media vans lined the street outside Vale HQ. Influencers and anchors recited their scripts with calculated outrage. Was billionaire Dorian Vale involved in covering up medical crimes? Who is the mystery mother? Why is she in hiding? Is the child's blood donation a heroic act, or part of a larger conspiracy? They questioned Amara's past. They questioned Maya's legitimacy. They questioned Dorian's humanity. Inside the estate, the atmosphere was just as heavy. Maya sat at the long dining table, knees tucked up, pushing peas around her plate. Dorian entered quietly. Not hungry? He asked. She didn't look up. Can I draw? He nodded. Moments later, she slid a piece of paper across the table. A simple stick-figure family, 3 figures hand in hand. Underneath, in careful child's handwriting, when you find Mom, don't let her go again. Dorian's breath caught. The crude drawing hit harder than any press attack ever could. In that moment, the truth settled in his bones. This wasn't a scandal. This wasn't a negotiation. This was family. Across the city, Victor Crane poured himself another drink. Locke has done his part, he said into the phone. Vale Atlas will default by Friday. Pull every supplier by morning, and leak the story that Vale insiders are jumping ship. He smirked, lowering his glass. And make sure the narrative stays focused on the criminal mother and her manufactured daughter. If Vale tries to defend them, he burns with them. Back at the estate, Dorian folded the drawing and placed it in his breast pocket, over his heart. His assistant burst in. Sir, creditors are demanding collateral. They want your personal guarantee. Dorian looked out the window, eyes on the horizon. Tell them, he said quietly. They can have everything. He turned, his voice now steel. But they cannot have her. War had been declared, and this time Dorian wasn't fighting for profit. He was fighting for truth, for Amara, for Maya, for blood. The ballroom of the Vale Foundation Charity Gala shimmered beneath a canopy of chandeliers, each crystal reflecting glimmers of wealth, power, and pretense. The elite filled the hall, investors, dignitaries, media titans, all waiting to see whether Dorian Vale would fall, or fight. What they didn't expect was Amara Brooks. She stepped onto the stage without an invitation, without permission, yet with the unmistakable presence of someone who no longer feared anything. Gasps swept across the room. Phones lifted. Reporters surged forward. Dorian rose from his table, heart pounding. How did she get past security? Why is she here? Amara didn't look at him. She looked at the world, and she began to speak. 3 years ago, Amara's voice carried through the hall and across millions of live stream feeds. 48 men and women volunteered for a medical trial. They believed Crane Meridian would save them. Instead, they were poisoned. The lights dimmed automatically as a screen behind her came to life, scrolling names, faces, ages, causes of death. The room fell silent. This, she continued, lifting a flash drive, is the original lab documentation, unedited, time-stamped, showing that Victor Crane falsified mortality data, declaring every death unrelated to treatment. A murmur of horror rippled through the audience. "Tonight," she said, "I am making them public." She plugged the drive into a console. The screen split into hundreds of documents, signatures, toxicology reports. Her live stream counter surged from thousands to millions in seconds. Within minutes, #Justice for Trial victims hit #1 worldwide. Donations poured into the foundation hosting the stream. Over $60 million raised in 10 minutes from viewers demanding accountability. Major media networks cut their regular programming to broadcast her feed live. In the center of it all, Amara stood like a storm, calm, relentless, unstoppable. And Dorian, watching from the crowd, felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years: pride. In a glass tower across town, Victor Crane nearly shattered his whiskey glass. "Shut her down!" he barked into the phone. "File emergency injunctions in every jurisdiction." "It's too late," his legal aide stammered. "The data is replicated across 11 independent servers, some hosted internationally." Victor's face twisted. "Then ruin her reputation. Leak whatever you must." Back in the ballroom, as applause and outrage battled in the air, Dorian's COO, Andrew Locke, slipped toward the exit. He didn't make it. A forensic auditor intercepted him and projected an audio file through the speakers. Locke's voice filled the room. "Crane has already wired the bonus. Once Vale Atlas defaults, I'll help him acquire it for pennies. Just keep the pressure on." "One more good scandal and Dorian will have to resign." Gasps, shock, then chaos. Investors turned from Dorian, not in blame, but in horror at what had been done to him. Crane's plot was laid bare. Locke's face drained of color as security moved in to escort him out. Amara's voice cut through the storm. "This isn't about one company's fall," she said. "It's about how many lives were trampled to build empires. Tonight, the truth belongs not to the powerful, but to the people." The camera caught her eyes, steady as firelight. And in that moment, the world chose a side. Not wealth, not power. Justice. The walls of the school gymnasium were covered in watercolor suns, stick-figure families, and crooked rainbows. Proud parents filled folding chairs, applauding each child as they stepped onto the stage to present their artwork. Maya's painting was last. A simple image, 3 figures, her, Dorian, and Amara, standing beneath a sky full of stars, holding hands. When she lifted her painting, the crowd gasped. Not because of her skill, but because of the title written in bright blue letters across the top. "My family is almost safe." Before anyone could ask what it meant, the doors at the back of the gym slammed open. 2 men in maintenance uniforms stepped inside. Maya turned. Then she vanished. By the time Amara and Dorian reached the school, flashing police lights painted the walls in chaotic strobes. Maya's painting lay abandoned on the floor, fluttering in the air-conditioned draft like a distress signal. Dorian's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. A distorted voice crackled through the line. "If you want the girl alive, tell the CEO and the whistleblower to come to Pier 19. Alone. No security. No police. If we see a single shadow that doesn't belong, you'll never see her again." The line went dead. Dorian turned, already signaling his head of security. "Mobilize the tactical unit. We locked down every pier within a 10-mile... No. Amara stepped in front of him. Her face was calm, but her voice carried iron. If you send security, they'll execute her before we get close. Dorian's eyes blazed. You expect me to just walk into a trap? I expect you to choose what matters more, she said quietly. Control, or our daughter. The word "our" hung in the air like a live wire. Every instinct in Dorian screamed to deploy overwhelming force, to use satellites, drones, specialized extraction teams, anything to take control back. But control hadn't saved Maya. Her courage had. Amara stepped closer. You want to prove you've changed? Then trust me. Trust us. Because if you go in there as the CEO of Vale Atlas, she dies. But if we go as a mother and father, we might bring her home. For the first time in years, Dorian had no strategy to hide behind. Just truth. Slowly, he lowered his phone. Preparation was quiet. No armored vehicles, no snipers. Just two parents stepping into the dark. Before they left, Dorian passed by Maya's bedroom. Her favorite stuffed bear sat at the edge of the bed, one button eye slightly loose. Without thinking, he picked it up and slipped it into his jacket. Amara noticed but said nothing. Outside, the sky rolled with low thunder. A storm was coming. As they approached the waiting car, Amara finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. They're not just after revenge. They want to erase us completely. Dorian nodded once. Then, they made one fatal mistake. Amara looked at him. They came for our child. The warehouse breathed a hollow metallic sigh as the rain drummed on the corrugated roof. Floodlights painted long, trembling shadows. Men in expensive suits and rough jackets formed a ring. Anonymous cameras streamed the scene to hidden servers. In the center, Maya sat bound to a steel chair, defiant despite the dark crescents under her eyes. Amara stood beside her, wrists bruised, the calm of a woman who'd already chosen truth over safety. Victor Crane stepped forward, immaculate and cruel, his voice a scalpel. Confess on air, he commanded into the nearest camera. Say you faked documents. Say you lied. Say you wanted fame or money. Take your confession and I'll release the child. Refuse, and you know what happens. Amara's lips pressed thin. I will not lie to protect a lie. Victor smiled, and the smile was a promise of ruin. Footsteps sounded. Heads turned as Dorian Vale walked through the corrugated door, rain soaking his coat, eyes black with a decision that knew no retreat. He halted 2 paces from Victor and lifted his chin. Take me. A ripple of surprised laughter. Victor's hand feathered the brim of his wristwatch. We'll do better than that. Let the world see the mighty CEO fall. He signaled to the thugs around him. 5 minutes. No retaliation. You bear it, and they walk. If you fight, if you resist even once, they die. Dorian glanced at Amara and then down at Maya, whose small chest heaved. He thought of empty boardrooms and calculated damage control, of the companies he'd built and the people he'd hurt to do it. None of that mattered now. I'll endure it, he said. Do what you will. The first strike landed like thunder, a gloved fist slamming into Dorian's mouth. He tasted copper and grit, but forced his knees to stay. Blow after blow came, palm, elbow, boot, engineered to humiliate and to test limits. Each hit blurred the edges of the world, but his intention remained crystalline. Keep standing until the timer ran out. Amara screamed once, a high, fragile sound, then stilled. Maya watched, terror and courage braided together in a child's expression. As the minutes crawled, the attackers grew more confident, more vicious. Dorian's vision narrowed. Light fragmented into shards. Yet between ragged breaths he catalogued each moment like an oath, a beat for every promise he had failed to keep, a counter for every year he had been absent. This was reckoning, not revenge. Hidden in Maya's sleeve, a tiny pink pepper spray capsule rested against her palm, the only tool Amara had given her for if things go wrong. Her fingers found it as a guard neared, his face a blur of sneer. She turned, thumb tight, and released a single desperate jet into his eyes. He howled and swatted blindly. Maya scrambled free, hands slipping on the wet concrete. Her small fingers closed on the seam of Dorian's coat and found a fabric loop, an almost invisible panic beacon he always carried in emergencies. She pressed it. A soft vibration shivered through Dorian's chest, signal sent. For a heartbeat, Victor's smugness held. Then distant sirens knifed through the rain. The thugs looked up, panic fracturing their coordination. Cameras continued to roll, but the narrative had already begun to split. Dorian took the last blow as the timer ticked into single digits. He tasted blood, but there was a steadiness beneath the pain. The knowledge that the worst thing in his life was no longer his empire. It was that anyone could harm those he loved. When the count reached 0, he was on his feet, trembling but upright. The ambush had failed in its purpose. It had not broken him. Outside, engines roared. Inside, Victor's smile faltered. The endurance test had changed everything. The warehouse doors burst open with a deafening crash. Armed police and federal agents flooded in like a storm, red and blue lights reflecting off steel columns. Victor Crane spun toward the commotion, eyes wide as a dozen rifles locked on him. "Victor Crane," an agent declared, voice booming through a megaphone. "You are under arrest for corporate fraud, medical manslaughter, conspiracy to murder, and financial terrorism." Behind them, a forensic officer held a tablet aloft. The monitor flashed damning files. Bank emails showing Victor bribing lenders to trigger Vail Atlas default. Signed documents between Victor and the COO outlining Vail's hostile takeover plan. Video depositions from drug trial survivors confirming data manipulation. Gasps filled the warehouse. Victor tried to bolt. 2 officers pinned him to the ground. Andrew Locke, the COO, backed away slowly, but the officers were faster. They cuffed him while he stammered, "It was Crane. I was coerced." "No one coerced you to accept a $50 million payout," the agent replied coldly. Amara rushed to Maya, wrapping her arms around the trembling child. Dorian staggered toward them, battered but breathing, eyes blazing with relief. Then his knees buckled. He collapsed. "Dorian!" Amara cried, catching his head in her lap. Blood pooled beneath him, slipping through her fingers. His breathing turned shallow, one eye already swelling shut. "He's hemorrhaging!" a medic shouted. "We need a stretcher now!" Maya clung to his hand. "Daddy, stay awake, stay awake!" As they lifted him onto the stretcher, Dorian's eyes fluttered open for one final moment. He looked at Amara. No words came, but in his gaze there was peace. Then he went still. Hours blurred into minutes in the stark white waiting room. Monitors beeped rhythmically behind double doors. Every tick of the clock felt like a hammer to the heart. At last, a doctor stepped out. His face bore the heavy expression of someone used to delivering sorrow. I'm sorry," he said softly. "We tried everything we could. There was too much internal bleeding. Mr. Vail is gone." The words detonated in the air. Maya screamed. Amara didn't scream. She simply fell. Her knees hit the floor. Her hands trembled. Tears finally broke free, silent and endless. She pressed a fist to her chest as though trying to keep her heart from tearing apart. In that moment, there were no corporations, no exposés, no empires. There was only loss. A nurse appeared suddenly, breathless. "Doctor, you need to see this, now!" Confusion flashed in the doctor's eyes. He glanced at Amara, then hurried back inside. Seconds later, muffled shouting echoed through the corridor. Amara's heart stopped. Then, the door opened. A different doctor stepped out. His expression was stunned, then hopeful. He's alive. He's in critical condition, but Mr. Vale just regained pulse. We're moving him to hyperbaric care. He has a fighting chance. Amara's breath shattered into a sob. Maya pressed her face into her mother's side, tears turning to laughter. Hope, fragile, trembling, alive, returned. Dorian Vale was not done fighting. The world always seemed loud to Dorian Vale, filled with numbers, headlines, and the constant hum of power. But this morning, as dawn unfolded over the quiet pier and the ocean breathed in slow silver waves, everything was still. Dorian stepped forward slowly, every movement careful. His injuries were healing. The faint marks of bandages peeked from beneath his shirt collar. The sea breeze ruffled his hair. Beside him stood Amara, her eyes reflecting the horizon, soft, unsure, glowing with a hope she didn't dare name. Maya ran ahead of them, spinning on the pier's wooden boards, her laughter light as wind chimes. Dorian turned to Amara. "There's something I never finished," he murmured. Her brows knit. "You need more rest. We don't have to—" But he was already lowering himself to one knee, not in weakness, in reverence. From his coat pocket, he pulled a small velvet box. Inside lay a heart-shaped diamond ring, not flashy, but unmistakably meaningful. The exact shape Amara once said was childish but perfect when they were young and dreaming. Her hand flew to her mouth. "I promised once," Dorian said, voice low and steady, "that I repay every debt." His eyes lifted to hers, filled with sincerity that stripped him of every layer of armor. "But you were never a debt. Not then. Not now." He took a breath that trembled at the edges. "You were the one thing I owed not repayment, but devotion." Amara's eyes glistened. "Dorian." He reached for her hand, placing the ring gently on her finger. "I built an empire to control everything, and I lost myself in it. But you and Maya, you are the only future I want to build, not with rules, not with contracts, but with love." A single tear escaped Amara's lashes, streaking down her cheek, then another. She didn't wipe them away. Maya appeared between them, beaming, grabbing both their hands. "So, does this mean we're really a family now?" Dorian looked at her, this brave, extraordinary child who had saved his life not with her blood alone, but with her faith. He squeezed her hand gently. "Yes, little one," he said. "We are a family." Maya's face lit up brighter than the rising sun. "Then can we go home now?" Dorian looked at Amara, a smile touching his eyes. "If you'll have me," he said softly. Amara nodded, tears shimmering like pearls in the morning light. "I never stopped." Dorian rose, one hand clasped in Amara's, the other in Maya's. Together they turned toward the path leading off the pier, not toward the past or the empire or the war, but toward the home they would build together. As they walked, the golden light of sunrise spilled over them, warm and full of promise. And Dorian's final words echoed silently, carried on the wind, an oath broken, rebuilt, and fulfilled. "I said, I repay my debts." But you were never a debt. You were my destiny. Thank you for watching to the end. I believe you enjoyed it. We have a lot of other interesting stories like this lined up for you already, so click the image showing on your screen to watch the next.